Impeachment is over, but the investigation into what happened on January 6th and who may have been involved is ongoing. As of last Friday, a DOJ spokesperson told CBS News that federal authorities had charged about 234 people. We're also seeing new video from the riot. CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge joins me now with more. Hi there, Catherine. So what does this new video from inside the Capitol show us?
Well, Elaine, CBS was among the first to report that the Sedition Task Force here in Washington was reviewing hundreds of hours of security camera video from inside the Capitol, as well as police body cam video. And this new material released by the House impeachment managers really lays bare the sheer force of the crowd on that day. We know through our reporting with the FBI, they say more than 500 persons of interest have been identified. That's law enforcement speak for more than 500 potential suspects. And as you watch the video, you can see the sheer volume of people pushing their way into the Capitol. And balance that with the fact that the Capitol Police had between 1,400 and 1,500 officers on duty that day. So it makes a lot more sense why they were so quickly overwhelmed. And in some parts of the new video, what you also see is a key element that we first reported here at CBS News about these small groups using military-style tactics to not only make their way into the Capitol, but what the video shows inside the building is they also use these military-style tactics to navigate their way through those hallways.
Really troubling to hear these details. Well, next week, the Senate Homeland Security Committee and Senate Rules Committee will hold a hearing on the security failures leading up to the attack. What are we expecting to see, and who could we hear from?
I think this is going to be such an important hearing because we're going to be hearing from the principal players who made decisions about the security posture in the days leading up to January 6th. We'll be hearing from the former chief of police with the Capitol Hill force. We'll also be hearing from the current head of police here in D.C. And very significantly, we'll be hearing from two individuals who have since left the posts, the former sergeant of arms in the Senate and the former sergeant of arms in the House. The sergeant of arms amounts to the chief law enforcement officer on Capitol Hill, and they make the final call on physical security. And what we need to understand through the hearing next week is the lead up to January 6th and at what point there was an offer or a refusal to have the National Guard supplement the Capitol Hill police as well as the Washington, D.C. police. Because the way it works here in Washington is because of the separation of powers and jurisdictional issues, it would not be the call of the Pentagon or the D.C. police to tell Capitol Hill security, you need to have reinforcements on the day. So the timeline will be very important.
And Catherine, where do charges against people for their alleged roles in the riot stand now?
I think a really good template, Elaine, is this case out of Tennessee. We've got Eric Munchell. He's often referred to as the zip tie guy because there's that iconic photo from inside the chamber where he's got these plastic zip ties on his belt. And those zip ties matter because they're sort of a makeshift handcuff, a plastic restraint can be used in that way. And he traveled to the Capitol with his mother. Both of them were held on initial charges, so very basic charges of unauthorized entry into a restricted area. But what we've seen now in the last 6 weeks is that built on those holding charges are more significant charges, now including conspiracy. And those two individuals are going to be held and transported up to Washington, D.C., which is another indicator, based on my experience, that more charges could be forthcoming. Right now, they're facing conspiracy charges, and that's one of the most serious charges that's been brought by the Sedition Task Force here in Washington.
And Catherine, you have obtained a DHS intelligence report that concludes, quote, domestic terrorists will pose an increased threat to government facilities and personnel in 2021. What trends are leading the department to that conclusion?
Well, this is a 7-page report that was obtained by CBS News, and based on my reporting, it's probably the most comprehensive intelligence assessment we've seen since January 6th. And what it cites is a number of factors that they believe could lead to violence, continued violence against government facilities and government officials. They talk about civil unrest. They talk about continued fallout from the presidential election. They talk about continued fallout from the COVID-19 restrictions. And so importantly, and we've discussed this in the past, the successful breach of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. This really was a watershed, according to law enforcement, because it had the effect of pouring gasoline on the fire of this extremist violence.